Hi, my name's Matt Widgery from mattwidgery.com. In Cambridge in the UK where I am, at the moment it is 30 degrees centigrade, and that means it's about 90 Fahrenheit, so it is an incredibly hot day, and so I wanted to review this lens, which is the 18-135 Fuji, and tell you if I think it's hot or not. So, in today's episode, this is the lens. We're looking at the 18-135 from Fuji. It is a zoom range which is incredibly useful, and when you compare that to full frame, gives you an equivalent focal length of between 28mm and somewhere around 200. So it does cover most of the things that you need. The reason I got it was because for a lot of the workshops I do, it's useful to be able to have just the one lens on the body. I've just come back from a workshop where one of the shoots we did was in a desert, and you can imagine you've got all that desert sand that's blowing around, and when you're changing lenses the whole time, your sensor in there is incredibly vulnerable to bits of sand and things like that getting in. It's useful, you know, to have one lens that can do a bit of landscape and a bit of portrait. You know, you zoom it all the way in, and that will compress the background nicely, so that's quite handy to have. However, there are a few more features that this lens have which are worth pointing out. If you have a look on the box, in fact, it'll give you an idea of just some of the toys that this lens comes with as standard. You can see there is a string of letters that is it's very long. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but this is the XF 18-135mm f3.5 to 5.6 R LM OIS WR. So basically the interesting things to point out on here, you've got WR, which is weather resistant, and that means that you can when paired with a weather sealed body, and the XT1 is a weather sealed body. I think it's the only one in Fuji's X lineup that currently is, so bear in mind if you put it on an XE2 or a X Pro 1, you won't have the weather sealing available through the body, so buying weather resistant lenses is kind of pointless, but if you do pair it with a weather resistant body, then you've got a weather resistant camera. And in fact, the pictures that are coming up on screen now are from a shoot that I did. I led a photo walk on Sunday where I took this out, and it pissed it down with rain. I mean, it absolutely hemmed it down. We got absolutely drenched. And the camera and the lens combo survived extremely well, and I was also very, very glad that I didn't have to be changing lenses the whole time, because the sensor would have just been a soggy, water-filled pond. There would probably been some little ducks swimming around on there, and you know, maybe some koi carp swimming in the bottom of it as well. So I was very pleased to have the weather resistance. That being said, just as a quick side note on this, I have noticed on my particular example of my Fuji XT1, which is this weather sealed body, the door on the side of the camera left, if you look at the back of the camera, where you have the microphone port and the USB and the HDMI cables, that little door, when you push it in, has started to bow out a little bit. There is a little bit of a gap now in between where the rubber gasket at the bottom of the door is and the middle part of that door. It kind of bows out a little bit, and you can actually see through to the rim of the metal HDMI port there as well. So I'm going to have to get that door changed at one point if I want it to be fully weather sealed. I don't know if anybody else has had any issues with that happening on their XT1. Please leave comments below if it has, but I thought that was rather interesting that it's done that on my copy. I will be talking to Fuji, and I'll keep you posted on that. However, back to the 18-135. So it's weather sealed. I was very pleased with it. It didn't fill up with water, so that's very, very good. In terms of overall image quality, it's okay. I mean, you have to make some allowances for the fact that it is effectively a super zoom. And, when you compare it to the super zooms that Nikon and Canon make, for example, both of whom do like an 18-200 and, some more, I think there's a 28-300 available for the Nikon. There is a drop off in quality. Basically, you've got so many elements going on in there and so many sort of bits where the image, the light has to go through glass, air, glass, air, glass, air. The more you have of that, the more your image quality will degrade. They are never going to be as good as a prime lens. That being said, I was actually pretty impressed by what I could pull out of the lens. raw files, I have noticed anyway that the raw files, the RAF files that come out of the Fujis, they need a fair bit of work to get them all sort of sharpened and looking nice. And you need to do a little bit more with this lens, I would say, to get it to a nice crispy looking crisp status. But when you do, the images are more than acceptable, and the image quality that I was getting when I'd worked on the files, it was worth the extra little bit of work to get them there, in terms of the offset of the lower image quality on there. But it is noticeable if, like me, you've come from using purely primes on the XT1, you get a bit spoilt with that image quality, and you will notice that the files, especially when they come straight out, as the RAF files, are a little soft. So you have to bear that in mind. Here, for example, on screen is an image where I haven't done any processing. This is just the RAF as it's come out of the camera. This is where I ended up with it. So you can see there is quite a nice difference on that. You can get to where you want it to be, and I find the end result perfectly acceptable. But bear this in mind. If you don't need the weather sealing, there is an 18 to 55 version of this, which is allegedly a bit sharper. I've not tried it personally, but I've seen enough reviews of people saying that they are very impressed, with the sharpness of that particular lens, and that might be the one to go for. However, it isn't weather sealed, and so if you want a zoom that's weather sealed, go for that one. Failing that, you can go for the constant aperture 2.8 lenses. There's a 16 to 50 and then a 50 to 140 that are weather sealed and constant aperture. So you might ask why I didn't go for one of those. Well, I still might. Having tried this, and it is a little softer, I may actually at some point go for the 16 to 50, the f2.8. It is quite a big, bulky lens, and you don't have that huge throw on it. But I don't know, having the more than the image quality, because for me the image quality I can live with, and certainly the way I post-produce the images, I can get them to where I want. But having the image that goes dark when you zoom in, I did find that problematic, because I was shooting in some pretty low light situations, and even indoors I did notice that the camera struggles quite a lot to get a nice bright image in it. And I've been spoilt because I've been using the little 18mm f2 and the 35mm 1.4, both of which of course let in a huge amount more light, and so it's quite a shock and totally different way of working to going to using a variable aperture lens. It's been a while since I've kind of really used one of those lenses for still photography, and it took a bit of getting used to. Ergonomically, it feels okay on the front of the camera. It doesn't feel out of balance at all, although it is quite heavy. You do want to sort of support the camera at the back of the lens there. So, it doesn't feel so comfortable to shoot, maybe one-handed, if that's the kind of thing you do. The other thing that I did notice, a guess against it, although it probably won't matter for everybody, I have been shooting with the tethered app on the iPhone quite a lot, and what I've been doing to get sort of candid images is having the camera around on the strap like that, having the remote for it on the camera, and then I've been able to sort of frame up looking at what's on the screen on the phone, and then press the shutter, and that's allowed me to get with the wide angle sort of 18mm on there, really close candid shots that fill the frame and look very, very dramatic. And you notice I've got my hand kind of awkwardly on here at the moment, and that's because with this lens, when you let go of that, it flops downwards like that, and so unless you're interested in taking pictures really only of people's shoes, it isn't so convenient to do that. So I've kind of, you can't use this lens for that. That won't be a problem for many people, I appreciate, and so maybe that's just me making a fuss about that. What else? Well, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a wonderful optical image stabilization system that's built into this lens. It is incredible. It claimed as being 5 stops. I was certainly able to get 5 stops. I was shooting zoomed all the way to 135mm. I was easily able to shoot 1/4 of a second handheld, half a second was starting to get a little bit of blur, but if you sort of control your breathing and prop against something, I bet you could do it. I bet you could get a half second, and no doubt there'll be some people out there that have managed to get a bit more. To some extent, that makes up for the variable aperture and the fact that you can shoot at lower shutter speeds when you slow the thing right down. But for me personally, the stuff I shoot in low light tends to be music, people are moving around, not the background, and so it's shutter speed all the way for me. So that it doesn't help too much. But if you're indoors and you want to shoot like an interior or something still moving, still not moving, the optical image stabilization on this is fantastic. The build quality, although this is not one of the Japanese lenses like the primes, this is actually made in China, and there is a little bit of plastic in it, whereas the prime lenses are all metal. The build quality of this is actually very, very nice. It far exceeds the quality of the build that you get from the Nikon and Canon sort of zoom equivalents, you know, especially the variable aperture ones. It feels very, very nice in your hand. There are lovely positive third stop clicks on the aperture ring. There is a nice level of dampening and resistance with the zoom. It's been pointed out sort of sometime by other reviewers, but there's quite an interesting thing you have to get used to. When you zoom all the way in, it feels like it's stopped, but if you look there, it stopped just before the 135, and you have to physically sort of turn it a little bit more. There's a bit of resistance as it just encounters that final gasket to push it out to 135, and that's part of its weather sealing. So if you think you've run out of throw, give it another little turn and you'll get a little couple of extra mil out of that zoom range as well. I love the fact that the manual focus ring in front of that is so easy to control. It's a thick ring and you can control it really easily with your finger there. That's really, really nice. I love all of that. On this side, just exactly in the right position for your hands, you've got the optical image stabilization that you can switch on and off. The only reason you'd ever switch it off, in my opinion, is if you're on a tripod. And then you've got your aperture button here. This is, again, what makes these cameras different to the standard prime lenses that you get with Fuji cameras. On the Fuji cameras, you've got aperture markings around the aperture dial, and then when you click it into the final marking past f16 or whatever the top one is, it goes to A, and that gives you, it's automatic then, basically, select the aperture for you. On this one, you've got manual there, and then you click the little button up, there's a little A, and it goes to automatic. There are no aperture markings on the dial itself, so you have to look on the back of the LCD or through the viewfinder to know what the aperture is. And that can take a little bit of getting used to if you've been used to the prime lenses where you just look down and say, oh, I'm at f11, you've walked indoors and you can flip it quickly to f2.8. You know, very easily you know exactly where you are. With this one, you do have to be looking through the viewfinder or on the LCD screen to do. So there are pros and cons to the lens. It does add a significant amount of bulk over the 18 and the 35, although some of the more modern and more recent primes like the 56 and the 90 are also a little bit on the chunkier side. It's slightly bigger than the 18 to 55, which is sharper than this one. However, this one's got the weather sealing, and if you do want a weather sealed zoom lens, this is definitely the cheapest and the lightest option, and it's got the best zoom range. And it is far cheaper. You can actually get these on the UK market now for around about £560, whereas the cheapest of the 16 to 50s that I saw were getting up towards 800, and you're north of 1,000 if you want to add the 50 to 140 to that, and those two lenses together only give you basically the same zoom range as you've got with this, albeit with the constant aperture. So there are pros and cons. I would not recommend this lens if you want to go and shoot music with it. I will not be going and shooting concerts with this lens because when you're zoomed into somebody on stage, there's absolutely no chance at 5.6 that you would be able to get the shutter speed up high enough to freeze motion. What I will be using it for is workshops and photo walks and things like that. And as a general walking around lens, I find it very, very convenient. So I would recommend it for if you're not the sort of person that likes to change lenses or that doesn't want to spend a huge amount of money on glass and just wants to have one versatile lens that will do a lot of different things. And of course there are options. Yes, it goes dark when you zoom all the way in, but you can always use a flash. You can always find ways around these things, get some off-camera flash going on. Again, not for music because you're not allowed to do flashes at gigs, in many venues. And even if you are, it's not something I like to do because it's distracting, but if you're doing sort of family events, you're on holiday, things like that, there's nothing wrong with using a flash there to give yourself that extra pop of light when you need it. The weather sealing, of course, is really the big ticket item, and if you have got an XT1, and this is by far the cheapest and most sensible way to get into weather sealing and make the thing work properly, because there's no point, you've got your weather sealed body, unless you've got a weather sealed lens to go with it, the water will get in between the lens and the body. it will, and then your camera will die. So, you know, unless you've got the thousands to spend on the more expensive lenses, this is a very, very useful one to have. And I would say that at 500, 600 pounds, and no doubt they'll get cheaper in time too. You know, you can get them secondhand, I think, for about 400 now. And for that kind of money, it's a very sensible option to have in your kit bag. And so I would recommend it for that. Although there are many occasions when you will need something a little bit brighter. So it's worth probably, if you are going to go down this route, doing what I've got, which is getting a couple of faster primes for when the light gets low and you need something with a little bit more brightness, a little wider sort of aperture in there. Other than that, you know, it is a very good lens, and so although the sharpness is not as good as the primes, you wouldn't expect it to be, it is definitely better than the equivalents from Nikon and Canon. And as you can see in the image results, you can get some really interesting and very cool results in there, and it's been a really fun lens to be using over the last, you know, sort of few days that I've had it. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. There is a great big button there, so jab at that and that will take you to the subscribe page. I would highly implore you to do that, because you will find lots of cool new videos coming out on a regular basis from yours truly, and you'll be the first to know. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.